Authorities in South Carolina have arrested a man for the murder of 17-year-old Brittanee Drexel, who disappeared while visiting Myrtle Beach in 2009.
For more than a decade, the family of Brittanee Drexel has wondered whatever happened to her.
Last images of her going into a hotel to meet up with friends during spring break.
Imagine secretly going on a trip to visit your friends for spring break at the beach, only to be abducted. Your last moments alive are comprised of pain and fear before hands wrap around your throat, taking your life. For 17-year-old Brittanee Drexel, that was a reality. This is the case of Brittanee Drexel. Welcome back to True Crime Files. Our love and respect goes out to all of those that knew and loved Brittanee Drexel, who was born on October 7, 1991, in Rochester, New York. Her parents, Dawn Drexel and John Kayoogola, had her out of wedlock, and Dawn eventually went on to marry Chad Drexel, who took in Brittanee as his own. Brittanee's early life wasn't easy. She was born with a medical condition called persistent hyperplastic primary vitreous in her right eye. After multiple surgeries, she still ended up blind in that eye. She wore contact lenses that made her appearance unique. She was a soccer star at Gates Chili High School and dreamed of becoming a cosmetologist. In April of 2009, Drexel was excited to go to the beach for spring break with her friends and boyfriend. Their destination, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, over 800 miles from home. However, her mother refused. She didn't know the kids her daughter would be hanging out with so far away, without adult supervision, and she was worried something bad was going to happen. After arguing with her mother for several days, Brittanee devised a plan that would allow her to hang out with her friends and enjoy her teenage years. On April 22, 2009, Brittanee asked her mother if she could stay at a friend's house for a few days so they could spend some time apart. Dawn agreed. But that day, Brittanee left for South Carolina with her friends, without her parents' knowledge. Brittanee only called her mother 3 days later, on April 25th, to tell her mother she was at the beach. Dawn assumed she had meant the beach along Lake Ontario, which is only about 35 miles from Rochester, New York. In reality, Brittanee was at the Bar Harbor Hotel in Myrtle Beach. Around 8 p.m. on April 25, 2009, Brittanee and her friends left the Bar Harbor Hotel to walk down South Ocean Boulevard and visit a longtime friend staying at the Blue Water Resort.
Last images of her going into a hotel to meet up with friends during spring break.
The security cameras caught her arriving at the hotel, dressed in beachwear. Around 8:45 p.m., the same camera shows her leaving, never to be seen again. Brittanee was texting her boyfriend, John Greco, who was not able to make it on the trip because of work. Around 9:15 p.m., her text stopped, and John grew increasingly concerned when she wouldn't answer any phone calls. He contacted her friends in Myrtle Beach, but they had not seen her, nor did they know what happened. As a last resort, John called Brittanee's mother. Dawn, not knowing her daughter had left without her permission, contacted the Rochester police in hopes that they could alert the authorities in South Carolina. The following morning, on April 26th, the police began looking for Brittanee. They obtained the security footage from the Blue Water Resort and found her friends. The last person who reported seeing Brittanee was a 20-year-old nightclub promoter named Peter Brozowitz. The two of them had previously known each other from Rochester, New York. But despite the footage and speaking with Brittanee's friends, the police did not have a person of interest. Peter remained the last known person to see Brittanee alive for years, and his reputation was dragged through the mud. Brittanee's parents deposited money in her bank account hoping to see some activity, but there was none. After searching Brittanee's room, the police noticed her cell phone and purse were nowhere to be found. This meant that she could have had them on her person at the time of her disappearance. They were able to track her phone's network pings, which led them to the Georgetown-Charleston County line, about 50 to 60 miles south of Myrtle Beach. The pings had stopped just that morning. For 11 days, the police searched the area along US Route 17, expecting to find a body, but to no avail. Brittanee's parents appeared on Dr. Phil, speaking with the last person to see Brittanee, Peter Brozowitz. After her disappearance, and with no new information, Peter received the brunt of the media and the parents' backlash. Many believed him, a 20-year-old who was hanging out with a minor, to be the cause of her disappearance. On May 11th, Peter and Brittanee's parents appeared on Dr. Phil,
You said you knew that the atmosphere down there was not safe, correct?
Correct.
So why didn't you step up and say, it doesn't matter, Brittanee, let me take you so-and-so. I can hear that you had an argument with John. Why?
It just seemed like you knew something that you weren't telling me. You knew something, and that bothered me, okay? This is about Brittanee. I want to find my daughter.
The confrontation between Brittanee's parents and Peter Brazowitz revolved around the damage done to his reputation due to comments they had made about him. They felt he should have been more responsible, should have stepped up and helped Brittanee because he was aware she was in a dangerous atmosphere, but they also claimed he should have had no involvement with her due to her being a minor. There were mixed responses from the public, some feeling Peter could have shown more remorse and done more to help Brittanee's parents, while others believed the parents wasted too much of their time pointing fingers at an innocent man. For years, no new information was gained. It seemed as if Brittanee had simply vanished off the face of the earth. No one knew if she was dead or alive, and it ate away at the family. Her parents took advantage of the media to spread their story, to warn other parents, and in hopes that their daughter may find them. In 2010, a man named Timothy Taylor was arrested for attempting to kidnap a 20-year-old woman, and they believed he could be connected to Brittanee. But the charges were dropped 5 months later because the cases were not related. In August of 2011, investigators searched an apartment that used to belong to Raymond Moody, who had since moved away. Moody eventually became the police's primary person of interest, but there still wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest. Dawn eventually moved to Myrtle Beach to be closer to where Brittanee had been last seen to monitor the investigation. Dawn had been tirelessly reaching out to the friends Brittanee had gone to Myrtle Beach with in hopes of finding her daughter. But according to Dawn, the friends didn't seem to care enough about her daughter to help. Dawn revealed in a 2014 newspaper, 5 years after her daughter's disappearance, that she believed her daughter was promised something, like a modeling job. She suspected her daughter had been trafficked, but the authorities disagreed. They claimed there was little to no trafficking there, but a recent study shows that Horry County, just 25 miles north of Myrtle Beach, is the #1 county in South Carolina for reports of human trafficking. Over the years, Brittanee's story was featured on America's Most Wanted, People magazine, on the Investigation Discovery Show, Disappeared, and more. Despite advancements in technology which made cell phone data more available, there was still no light shed on the mystery of Brittanee Drexel. Human remains were found near the area she was last seen, but the body discovered turned out to be male. It wasn't until 2016, 7 years after the disappearance, that the public began to admit that Brittanee had been murdered. There weren't any new significant developments until August of 2016. 2 months prior, the FBI put up a $25,000 reward for information that might lead to the case being solved. A report came in from a bond hearing for a man named Timothy Taylor, the same man who was accused of trying to kidnap a 20-year-old woman in 2010, was in jail because of an unrelated robbery charge. A man named Taquan Brown, another inmate in South Carolina who had been serving 25 years for manslaughter, told FBI agent Garrick Munoz that in 2009 he had gone to visit McClellanville Stash House to give money to Taylor's father. He claimed that, as he walked through the house, he saw Taylor sexually assaulting Brittanee with other witnesses. Brown found Taylor's father, gave him the money, and as they talked, he saw Brittanee run from the house. But she was recaptured by Taylor, and then he heard gunshots. He claims he later saw a wrapped body being removed from the house, and then dumped in an alligator pond. According to another inmate in Georgetown County Jail, Taylor had picked up Brittanee in Myrtle Beach and had taken her to McClellanville to show off to friends and sell her for trafficking purposes. Because of the media's attention, Taylor decided to kill Brittanee to avoid arrest. Taylor's lawyer believed the new charge wasn't believable due to the unreliable witnesses. There were questions of double jeopardy, but there were laws around that for bringing in these suspicious charges, and many were desperate for answers. Taylor maintained his innocence and states the inmate was just trying to get the reward money. In June of 2017, as part of a plea bargain, Taylor took a polygraph test, where the FBI marked some answers as deceptive. Taylor admitted to having overheard part of an argument about Brittanee's phone, but nothing more. The examiner determined that his answers to whether he had seen Brittanee after her disappearance or if he was involved were ruled as not truthful. Taylor became too angry to continue later. In 2019, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the government to uphold dual sovereignty. In February 2019, WHEC-TV did a telephone interview with Brown. At the time, he was incarcerated at McCormick Correctional Institution in South Carolina. His story became even more far-fetched than before. He claimed to have seen Brittanee 4 times after her disappearance. He said he saw her 2 days after her disappearance on April 25, 2009 at McClellanville. She was being sexually assaulted by a group of 8 to 12 young men, and Brown didn't recognize her until seeing her on TV later. He saw her again a few days later, where he heard the gunshot inside the building and saw a body being carried out in a rug. He believed it had been Brittanee at the time. 5 days later, he saw Brittanee again on a dirt road near his cousin's home in Jacksonboro. And the last time he saw her was in May, on his cousin's property again. Brown claimed he witnessed a man named Nate shooting Brittanee twice with a double-barreled shotgun, and Brown and his friends left in fear that they'd become accomplices. While his description of McClellanville matched his story, and the first half of his story stayed consistent, the friends and family he mentioned could not be found to verify his story. Brown ended up filing a lawsuit against FBI agent Munoz, a federal prosecutor named Winston Holliday, and other officials because they took his identity to the public. He was viewed as a snitch, which put his life in danger. He claimed to already have been assaulted because of them, and that Taylor had put a $15,000 bounty on his head. 3 years later, in May of 2022, we learned that most of Brown's story was made up when a man stepped forward and turned himself in.
Drexel girl walking along on the sidewalk, and she noticed that, walked over to the door and said something about that smells like good weed. I said, yeah, you want some? Sure. Get in. She hopped right in the back without a problem.
Raymond Moody was a 62-year-old registered sex offender. In 1983, he abducted and raped a 9-year-old girl. He spent 21 years in prison. He turned himself in to the Georgetown County Sheriff's Office on the basis of an obstruction of justice. Police had considered Moody a person of interest in 2012, but never had the evidence to charge him of any crime. Back in 2009, Raymond Moody was with his girlfriend, Angel Vaus. He had been cheating on his partner, Ernest Merchant, and both of them spoke out against Moody whenever he turned himself in.
To think that I ever loved him, and now I feel like I never knew him at all. I think that I knew a part of him. I knew the part of him that tried to be better, that wanted to be a better person.
Ernest Merchant met Moody in prison, and they started a relationship there that carried on afterwards. The relationship eventually ended when Merchant caught Moody having an affair with a woman named Angel Vaus. Angel Vaus was the last person to see Brittanee alive. She went on a ride with the 2 strangers to a campsite where they all smoked together. After Vaus left, Moody admitted to sexually assaulting and then murdering Brittanee.
Things got out of hand, and I panicked, and she panicked, and I strangled her.
Merchant reports that, around the time of Brittanee's disappearance, Moody had claw marks on his face and bald head. Merchant even directly asked Moody if he had anything to do with the girl's disappearance, and Moody's response was, "No, I would never do anything like that." He says that Moody was never unkind or cruel, but his attitude changed when he got off parole and suddenly believed he could do whatever he wanted because he was free. Merchant asked the investigators during his interview why Moody turned himself in and if rumors of him being mentally ill were true. They couldn't reveal much during an open investigation, but a series of events led to Moody turning himself in that might not have occurred 5 years ago. A medical doctor states that he wouldn't be surprised if Moody was mentally ill. Angel Vaus reported that Moody used her for many years. After hearing his confession, she grew suspicious that Brittanee might not have been the only one. He told her about crazy fantasies he had that were wildly inappropriate and involved more than one girl. Vaus told WMBF that Moody always said teenager, but at this point I'm beginning to think children. He wants to snatch them. He wants to have a place to take them. He said he wants to set up a place in the woods, because he says that they mean nothing to him. They're just like a toy in his toy box. Moody admitted to Vaus that 12 of his victims were in California, but they were all of age. Moody had said to her when he was sexually aggressive with her that it was better you than someone else. When asked why Vaus stayed with Moody, She told him she was afraid he would kill her if she spoke to police. He threatened to make her disappear like Brittanee did if she left. After murdering Brittanee, Moody wrapped her in a blanket and then hid her in the woods to bury later. Vos returned, and Moody told her Brittanee's friends had picked the teen up. He returned later and buried her in a shallow, 4-foot grave. When investigators asked what Moody did with Brittanee's belongings, Moody states that he cut up her ID, dropped her purse off in a donation box at a Salvation Army, and threw her phone in the river. Moody took investigators to a piece of private property on Pickerel Road in Georgetown, where he buried Brittanee next to the dirt road. It was 12 miles from where Moody strangled and killed Brittanee. It took about 11 days of searching before the investigators were able to locate her remains. They were cutting down trees and excavating the dirt when they found human bones. They spent the next 18 hours working to retrieve all the remains. Essentially, only a skeleton remained of Brittanee after all these years. She still had hair and one blue-colored contact lens lay in her eye socket. A silver nose piercing was found too, but no clothing. Within 48 hours, officials were able to confirm that the remains belonged to Brittanee through dental records and DNA. The remains corroborated Moody's story, and he was then charged with murder, criminal sexual conduct, and kidnapping.
I was a monster. And I took Brittanee Drexel's life. I don't have the words to express how horrible I feel. And I've felt ever since that day very, very sorry.
Raymond Moody showed remorse for the horrible things he did to Brittanee, but he received no sympathy from Brittanee's parents, especially Dawn. They had spent the last 13 years searching for their daughter and would show no mercy when facing the man who took her from them.
I hope you suffer in prison for the rest of your useless life.
In October 2022, Moody was convicted and sentenced to 2 consecutive 30-year sentences for the charges of criminal sexual assault, kidnapping, and murder. He pleaded guilty to all charges. Brittanee's parents were present and asked the judge to hand out the harshest sentence he could. Moody will now spend his remaining days in prison, living with the guilt and knowledge of what he did and how much he is hated. In January of 2023, Dawn filed a lawsuit against her daughter's killer. She is suing him for intentional infliction of emotional distress and outrage. Dawn dedicated 13 years of her life doing everything she could to find her daughter, and they went through hell because of Moody, until he stepped forward. The lawsuit states, "There is likely no greater sense of loss than that of a parent who has lost a child, such that the murder of a child is such extreme and outrageous conduct that it exceeds all bounds of decency." It goes on to state that Moody knew the effects of his actions and could have stepped forward sooner. Dawn states that she is entitled to damages and even medical bills, along with loss of enjoyment in life, pain, suffering, and mental anguish. As of April 3, 2023, the deadline for Moody to respond to the lawsuit has passed. Without a response, it means he is not arguing against anything that was alleged in the wrongful death lawsuit against him. A judgment will be determined at a later date to determine the amount of money Dawn is owed. Brittanee had a long and beautiful life ahead of her. She was outgoing, an athlete, and had dreams. All of those were snuffed out after a few bad decisions that a young girl made. She crossed paths with the wrong man, and many suffered because of it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because that makes this video possible. And here's another one you might enjoy.